One-to-One is a long-running series, but as far as I know, this is the first episode to be recorded actually in a bird hide. I'm at the London Wetlands Centre in southwest London with my friend Tom Burke, an environmentalist and academic. Tom, we'll come on to the real purpose of the conversation in a moment, but we're in this hide and we're looking out of the window. What are we looking at?
Well, we're looking at one of the best urban wildlife centres anywhere in the world. And we're looking currently at some swans. There are some coots out there, a lot of Canada geese, just some waders too far away for me to spot what they are that just fly across.
Those ones flying over, what are they?
Those are the waders I was talking about. They're just too far away for me to recognise with the naked eye. But most of the birds we can see at the moment are some very elegant looking swans.
And we're here for a reason, because you've got strong feelings about what you want to leave and why.
Yeah, I grew up in a council estate in Plymouth and find myself with a valuable estate to leave.
And how's that come about?
Well, almost by accident, largely because as very many people of my generation, real beneficiary of the great expansion in property values.
You're a baby boomer.
I'm a 60s baby boomer, exactly so. And I managed eventually to buy a house, and the prices went extraordinary. So I benefited from that, came to live where I live now in central London in Clink Street, right in the middle of Southwark on the river, a place I probably couldn't afford to live these days. But one way or another, I've accumulated a net sort of worth of about 3 or 4 million, between 3 and 4 million pounds.
This is something new to you. I mean, you didn't grow up with this.
I grew up, as I say, I grew up in a council estate in Plymouth. I grew up in a house with no books. There was nothing to inherit from my family except really good genes and tremendously good examples of people, but basically mostly by luck and hard work. And I'm not married, so I don't have children who are an enormous drain on estates. So now I have to think in a way that I've not been culturally prepared for. What do I do with all this?
And what has your answer been?
Don't give it to the tax man. So it's the first thing. I have watched through people I've worked with that I've seen how people with great creativity, great talent, and inheriting lots of money, it quite often constrains their sort of aspiration, their ambition to do something with their talents. So I very early came to a sort of thought that I've got some nephews, nieces, I will leave them something that gives them a gap year or gives them
a helping hand in a way.
Yeah.
But if you felt if you left it all to them, that it would constrain their creativity, stop them having as much drive in life.
Said very simply, it's not really good for them. So give them something that allows them to buy a deposit in a house, gives them an opportunity to do something they wouldn't otherwise be able to do, and I'll do that for all of them. But then I think the rest of it I want to leave to charity, and largely to environmental. Well,
I mean, you spent your life in environmental causes.
Yeah, I've spent 45 years working for the environment. And what I'd really like to do, because birds have been one of the things that have sort of seen me through all that, travelled all over the world, both working for government, working in businesses, working with NGOs, seen really huge numbers of birds, because it was always the thing to do to avoid just looking in hotel rooms and meeting rooms and aeroplanes. So I was
talking to government people, all this. So wherever you were, you went to look for the birds.
I went to the most extraordinary places. You'd find yourself in a sewage farm, or places you would never ordinarily go to, because that's where the birds were. So it helped to really sort of break up, a life in rooms, really. And also, more significantly, birds are a real, in a way, biological canary. If birds are doing well, the biosphere is doing well. If birds are not doing well, then you're looking at an impoverished and degraded ecology.
So how are you going to do this?
Well, I've started talking to a lawyer. Basically, the bulk of my estate I will leave to BirdLife or a similar organisation. And the particular thing I want to do, I guess the most valuable piece of my estate is just, again, very luck. I bought a flat.
And you're living in it at the moment. This isn't, you're not sitting on a pile of spare cash. You're living in it, you're living in a flat, which has done what London Property has done, and so it's really where to leave that.
It's worth a lot of money. And what I do know, because I understand the way voluntary organisations are funded, charities are funded, what is really good would be to leave them the asset which can be rented out after I'm gone, and would generate possibly in that part of London £50,000, £60,000 a year every year. That can fund a programme continuously. And that sort of funding, that sort of untied like that, is really powerful and valuable.
Do you want to control how they use it? Do you feel that that gives you enough assurance that you're going to have the kind of influence you want? You're handing it over, after all, to an organisation.
I think yes. I mean, in the sense of, I don't want to try to manage it, but the particular thing like creating a fund that can permit the training of bird guides. Now, if you enter into a legacy deal like that, then
the Tom Burke program for bird guides.
Yeah, the charity. I'm not sure. I won't be bothered about that Tom Burke bit, but the program bit. As long as there's enough funding, then the program will continue. Which is the point about leaving them an asset that can generate revenues, not just a pile of cash. And there are some things I would quite like people to do some serious study of. For instance, we have 1.2 million members of the RSPB in Britain. The only other country that comes close to having that kind of membership proportion of its population as members of Bird Society is Holland. So what is so peculiar about the British people that they love birds so much? When I've asked people, they've never been able to explain to me why. What is the cultural thing?
You said when we started talking about this that I don't want to leave it to the Chancellor of the Exchequer. And a lot of people will be listening to this, I would think, and think, why not? This country has a lot of debt and deficits, and that's a way of sending it, for the good of the whole country and other people's children and so on. Tom, why not there?
Well, two reasons. First reason, this is all money I've paid tax on, so I'm not passing on inherited wealth, where I think there might be a different argument. It's already been tax paid, so I don't see why the tax one should get two bites at that cherry. But the second reason is I don't have a lot of trust in the priority that this government, or indeed any government I've experienced, is putting on preserving biodiversity. I understand that actually our future security, our future prosperity depends on doing that. I'm not sure there's anybody much in politics who does.
Is it money you pay tax on, though? Because a lot of people in London have seen the same thing, of houses go up in value. It is not just London. London, of course, and tax hasn't, under the British tax system, been paid on that, at least at this point.
No, but the mortgage was paid for by money I paid tax on. Now, the value could go down as well as go up. I'm not claiming that, but my actual idea is it shouldn't be sold, that it would generate an asset. And I have to explore whether I'm able to put that into a covenant on the legacy so that it's not sold, it's retained as an asset that generates a revenue flow.
Many people would say it's yours to do what you want with, though other people get very worried and say, look, inheritance in general leads to rising inequality and governments should try and do something about this.
I think that general point is right, and I think particularly as a 60s kid looking at what's happening to millennials and what their prospects are economically and environmentally, I think there's a real issue about intergenerational equity that we need to address much more systematically and much more thoroughly than we've done in the past. But I'm not sure I want that to start with the Chancellor making a proposal, right? I think there should be a much wider ranging discussion, which hopefully this programme will contribute to, about how we should do that, how we should restore a much better measure of intergenerational equity. And I feel that quite strongly.
I think lots of people would agree with you, and there's some real force behind that. The life assurance industry, though, interestingly, says actually we may be looking very soon at the end of inheritance. This is almost a kind of bubble of a phenomenon, a generation with a lot of wealth, but actually people are going to have to spend it on their own old age care and dementia and so on in the future. So, this is more of a one-off than it might feel at this time.
If we don't deal with climate change, I don't think we'll be living in a world in which anybody at all is worrying about inheritance.
When did you start thinking about the kind of legacy you wanted to leave?
I really started thinking about it when I moved to my current flat, and quite soon afterwards was able to pay off the mortgage, and then started thinking, well, what am I going to do with this? So I was probably in my late 40s before I started to think about it at all. It never occurred to me that there would be something to leave. Yeah, exactly. And I felt quite responsible for the asset I've built up. I couldn't have built it up if it wasn't a stable and prosperous country. So I feel the sort of a thing to be responsible about what doing it, not to just let it all go, and stop worrying about it. And it's quite hard to do when you start thinking about what are you actually going to do when you die, and it makes you think about all the things you put off to tomorrow, because you start to realize you may not already have enough tomorrows.
You found out many years ago that you had leukemia. Did this sharpen your sense of thinking about what you wanted to do with your life and a legacy?
Yes, the thing about being diagnosed with cancer is there's a moment when somebody tells you have cancer and it just changes everything, because whatever you know and the detail, all the rest of it doesn't matter. The sort of impact of that gives you a very different perspective on things. Mostly what you do in life is revocable, or you think it's revocable. When somebody tells you you've got cancer, you know it's not revocable. As it turned out, even though I was told that this is an incurable condition, will shorten your life, but it's very slow acting, I basically, my blood cancer has been normal for a long time. I don't even go and have checkups anymore, so I'm in effect cured. So what was great was it did give me that sort of, that's a grounding in reality when somebody tells you. Two things happen. One is that thing that happens to your own sense of yourself when somebody tells you basically you're going to die, and you think about everything a bit differently, and you can't brush that away when it's a diagnosis in front of you and you're looking at the counts. The second thing is you discover the extraordinary extent to which people love you and express that love in a way you wouldn't otherwise feel.
Tom, we're looking out at these birds on this lake, and in a way what you've described to us is enviably simple. You've made a decision about what you're going to leave your legacy to, and in a way that gives you some control over that. But also what you're describing is not feeling that there's very much control at all about what happens to the environment in the future.
Yeah, I think that's right, and that simplicity and sense is a function of not having had children. I mean, I think if I'd had children of my own, first of all, there wouldn't be as much to leave, and secondly, they'd have much greater call on it than relatives.
Did you inherit anything from your parents at all?
No, there was nothing material that I inherited. The thing I'm really saddest about, I inherited my father's medals. He was a sailor and won medals during the war, and they were stolen. And I, to this day, that sort of stings a bit. But that was the only thing, other than, of course, what I inherited from my parents was, in their own thing, was a combination of both intelligence and determination. They were very strong characters, very defined characters. They'd been through some pretty difficult times in the war, you know, like everybody did. And I think a lot of baby boomers grew up with parents who'd been through the war, who, without thinking about it, passed on to them some of that sense of realism, that sense of the need to pull together. Yeah, to fight together against something. I think you inherited that without even thinking about it.
Have you've taken that into being an environmentalist?
Yeah, without any doubt at all. That sort of sense of you're responsible for what you do, you choose how you make your life and how you shape your life, you've got gifts and talents, you should use them. Education was absolutely a dominant consideration of my parents in upbringing.
In these conversations about inheritance, we've been talking a lot about money, inevitably, or possessions that are handed on, but actually we've just now ended up talking about character, something that handed on from the wartime generation to the baby boomers, and about you, in your case, Tom, about handing on something else, a commitment to the environment.
Yeah, a commitment in a sense, if you like, to recreate the kind of opportunities for future generations that I inherited from my parents' generation.
Tom Burke, thank you very much.
Thank you.